Hey, it's Nick, and today I'm going to be showing you a little bit of action with the project that I've been working on. I don't really have a name for it yet, but it's this thing in which you can program stuff, and right now the hope of a lot of the programming is to let you draw on the screen. So I'm just going to draw a little bit. What I've been doing there is I was just using the Apple Pencil with my iPad, on which this is being recorded, to draw a couple lines in this nice yellowy color. And how did that happen? So here's a list of scopes. They're just places that code can run. And we can select one of them to open them. And what we have here is the brush scope. The box here lets you type in some code that you can run in this scope. And in the project, that's called sending to the scope. So we're going to send some code to the scope. And it's free to do whatever it wants with this thing that we sent it. But right now, all of them will just run this code within themselves. So we're going to do something basic. We can just say print hello world as a common thing to do in the beginning. And I'm going to say send, and you see in the console, which is where things get printed, hello world. We can try setting a variable. So I'm going to say a variable named a variable, and I'm going to set that to 24. And if I hit send, you can see that the variable appeared down here, and that is the value of the variable. And I can actually print now a variable, and it prints that variable out in the console. I can change this to something else, like 42, and print again. But there's a neat trick here. So this left and right button lets me go back and forth through the history of messages that I've sent to the scope. And print a variable is the last one that I sent, and I just want to send it again, so I'm just going to do that. And now you can see that it's 42. We don't really want this variable hanging around, so I'm just going to remove it for now. Oh, whoops. I think there might be an issue in my code somewhere, but I can actually go ahead and fix that code because the system is written in itself. Let's see, so inspect slots is the thing that goes through all of the slots. And oh yeah, cool. So what I can do is, it is calling per slot a function to actually render the name of that slot, which is what you see on the left side over here. And I actually refactored this code to move that stuff out, and needs removal is probably got moved out with that function. So let's look at that. And sure enough, like, it should be over here. Yeah. So what we can do is have that return out of this function. So let's do a little bit of live coding of the system itself over here. So I'm gonna create a local variable here. Removal is false. And then set that to true. Needs removal is true. And then return needs removal. Yeah, that looks right. I'm going to do that. And back in the larger slots function, I will say if that returned true, then needs removal for that name is true. The reason that I'm doing that rather than just setting it to true or false based on their values, I actually just iterate through all of the names in that table. Anyways, let's see if that helped. Yeah, so that did fix it. But as you can see, I didn't expect to run into that, but as you can see, the system is written in itself, and so you can go ahead and fix issues or change things about it that you want. Anyways, back on track. So let's look into the paint function in a brush. This is what gets drawn when you touch the screen, as you do with this brush. And you can see it's setting this lovely color over here and drawing an ellipse. And the X and Y axis radii of the ellipse are 10 and 10 respectively, so it looks like a circle because those are equal values. How can we play with this? So one thing we can do is we can allow ourselves to refer to a variable for the radius. So I'm going to use the variable radius for that. And if I draw now, as you might expect if you have a keen eye, that doesn't really work. Why? Because we haven't really defined this variable yet. And it says I expected a number, but I got nil, because unset values are nil. So what we can do is define the radius now to be something. So let's make it 10. Why not? And now we should have back where we were before. It looks like the same thing, but it's different because now we can change this to like 40, which is quite big, and we'll have a bigger brush, right? Another thing that's happening over here is the brush is actually drawing to this other scope called layer, and we'll see how that happens. But for now, one thing that layer does support is the clear function. And if we just run that, then it clears that layer. So we're going to keep this layer around to clear it once in a while. And coming back to brush, how did that happen? So how did we actually draw the layer? The tick function is a function that's called every frame if you subscribe to the clock, which is something that lets things know about ticks of time as time elapses. And what we're doing is every tick, if the mouse is pressed and the user interface isn't grabbing the mouse, then we call the paint function, and we're rendering it to the layer, and the layer has a render to function that you can see over here, and that renders whatever you drew to the layer's canvas, which is just a graphics thing. For now, you know, we can just not worry about that and work within the bounds of this paint function, but that was just an FYI. So coming back to it, we have radius, and this is nice, but it's not the best way to edit a radius. I would like a nicer way to do it, like a slider. So let's try using a slider instead. I'm going to go back and clear the screen, and how that's done is you can set metadata on slots, and that's basically tells the system other stuff about the slot. And in this case, we want to tell the system how to show or edit the slot in the inspector. So we're going to do inspect style radius, inspect style prefixing the name of a slot with the first letter starting with uppercase is a slot that you can set to set the style of the inspection of that slot. So it's a bit meta here. Regardless, let's just do it. So type equals slider. And we also need a minimum and a maximum value, and I'm going to set those to 0. And honestly, 40 was pretty big, so let's just go with a maximum value of 25. Send that over there. And you can see now radius is a slider. And it used to be 40, and this is just a rendering thing, and it doesn't change the radius, so it's actually still 40 even though the limit of the slider is 25, but once we start using the slider, it gets into action. Anyways, so let me try drawing now, and I can use the slider to change the radius of my brush already. So you can see here that we have all of the code for this brush, and it's immediately usable in this way and changeable, right? And we can do a fun Love2D thing, which is the graphics layer underlying everything, and draw ellipses that are hollow instead with the line style of drawing, and we get hollow ellipses. And we can change the radius of that, go back. So I'm gonna clear the screen again. And one thing that'd be really fun is if we made, I'm gonna go back to filled ellipses, by the way, so. All right, let's just use fill over here. Okay, so, yeah, the color thing. So let's do the color thing. Over here, I'm gonna go with variables called colR, colG, colB, and colA. A is alpha, which is an opacity value for color. Right now we're just going to set it to 1 for it to be opaque, but we might run into using that later, so let's just roll with it. And I can also define the variables in this message, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And we're just going to go with a bright and solid and pure red. And now you can see that we have these variables. And this isn't a great way to visualize the color slots, but I'll show you a better way later. For now, what we can do is let's try to randomize the color every time we draw. So how can we do that? Well, as it turns out, the way that we subscribe to clock, we can subscribe to input. And there's a function called mouse pressed, or a name called mouse pressed, which if you define a slot having that name in your scope as a function, that function is called when the mouse is pressed if you subscribe to input. Anyways, so we're just going to print pressed over here. And of course, this is a touch interface, but the mouse events are fired by touching the screen. I could also call it touch pressed for what it's worth. Anyways, let's just say subscribe input. And I'm gonna go with touch pressed for now, just to see if, I just feel like the verbiage is better because I'm actually touching the screen. So touch pressed input, let's do this. That seems to have made no difference. I'm gonna try mouse pressed instead. Yeah, that was better. Yeah, I'll look into the details on the input event name stuff. So clear the screen now, and what I want to do is not print. Also, I'm going to remove the touch press function, and I don't want to print here. I actually want to set the color to a random value, so I can do here color equals map random, which by default picks between 0 and 1, so we can just go with that. And now we have random colors, and we can keep the radius slider around, keep it handy, and just keep drawing lines of various radiuses and various colors. Nice. So it would be nice to have the option of picking the color and and visualizing it in a way that's not just these numbers. How do we do that? It would be nice to have a single slot that shows things in that way. So as it turns out, one of the possible inspection styles for a slot is as a color picker. I'm going to make a virtual slot called call, and I'm going to set the inspection style of that to a color style. And now you'll see that we can set the color this way. Right now it's just a basic version of it where it just assumes that the slot names of the R and G, B and A coordinates of the color are in this format with the same name and with the capital letter appended, but I'll make it so you can specify the names. So over here, this is actually randomizing the nice color that I picked. So we need a way to tell it not to randomize if you want it to not randomize. So one way to do this is we define, let's say, a Boolean slot called randomize color, and we can say false for it for now. And over here, only do things if that's true. Oh yeah, this should be coming afterwards. The editor is very simple right now, the code editor, and hopefully I'll work on a better one and maybe write it in the same system. So we have that, and now it doesn't randomize it anymore, and we can pick like this little green over here and go on. But then we can also randomize and continue painting and change this a little bit and continue painting the radius as a different radius. So yeah, that's what I've been working on. And of course, because this is programmed, like the brushes are programmatic. I mean, brushes I guess in any program are programmatic, but it's more a question of to what extent the user can affect this programming. And in this case, it's almost completely. What we can do is we can go ahead and change the logic of the brush. And a fun thing to do could be to actually what could be a fun thing over here? How about I add an offset to the the Y position of the brush? That is, okay, let's do that. So it's going to do it a sine of time, and we probably want to multiply it by things. And over here, I'm just going to oscillate 4 times this thing, which is whatever it happens to be. And we're going to set an offset of, the radius is about 4 to 20, so let's go with, how about we go to 20 over here and start drawing sideways over here, and you'll see that it's actually oscillating with the sine value. I mean, you can't see where I'm actually touching the screen, but take my word for it, if you will. Let's make this oscillation faster. So let me edit that paint function again. I should just go back in history for it. Yeah. Let's make it like, that was pretty slow, so let's go with 25. It seems like 25 is a number that keeps popping into my head right now. Anyways, so looks like it's good. That looks pretty nice. One of the nice things about it is actually the X rate is given by me touching the screen, so I can actually accelerate to create this accelerating wave effect. I can of course also change the base Y position and do this. So why do this, you might ask? Like I can surely draw the waving by hand. But the nice thing here is that the waves are actually really precise, and across all of the bands it looks consistent, which I think is actually an important part of this piece as it stands, the sketch. But yeah, and we can go in and add a couple fatter brush instances over there. So let's go ahead and do that too. That actually doesn't look so great. I also don't have undo on the layer, so we're stuck with this. Anyways, let me show you what it looks like, for example, with rectangles. So I'm going to go back to the paint function and change this to be a rectangle instead. Actually, rectangles look great when you don't fill them in, so let's go back again and change that to line. Yeah, this is actually pretty. This is quite interesting. So one thing we can do is actually get the pressure off the touch and use that to affect the radius. Let's go ahead and edit the paint function again, and this time let me get the pressure first. So this is just a Lob2D API thing, but basically get touches returns the touch ID names of all of the touches on the screen. So yes, multi-touch does work, and the first element of that is the ID of the first touch, and we want to get the pressure of that touch. And we can just set the radius to, let's try like 10 times that. See how that goes. So yeah, that's an interesting effect. And you might actually have the chance to see the radius vary as I change pressure. So I'm touching hard and releasing as I go. And yeah, you can see that happen now. And if I come in and pull out there, yep. The colors are actually sort of like the colors, they're very vivid. It's actually interesting to also oscillate in the direction of the waves as I'm doing this. Yeah, I like how this is looking. Let me go back and clear it all in. Interesting. So maybe, we could also affect the sine oscillation amount based on the pressure. And I wonder what happens if we actually do it inverted. So if I press harder, we're gonna make it oscillate less. That would actually make sense in some sort of weird mass idea, because bigger brush instances might have a higher mass and bounce less or something. Anyways, so let's see. So we have sine. So sad as that sounds, I don't actually have copy paste right now. So I mean, I do in theory, but the keyboard stuff needs to be figured out with iOS. So I'm just gonna do mat sine, do the exact same thing here, and remove this line. So yeah, and so with that, let's do P, and oh, actually it needs to vary in an inverted way. So I think the p-values range approximately from 0 to 3 to 4 in my experience. So I could do like, what did I have here? I had 20. So I could do 5 minus p. Is math.min even a thing here? I forget. So I think it is. Yeah, it is. So let me print math.min 0 or -3. Oh, actually that should be max. I mean, it doesn't matter. I'm just like trying things out, but yeah. So we can just clamp it at 0, you know, just in case it ever happens to go above. And let's do around 4 times that. I don't know. Whatever this looks like. I don't know what that is, but we'll see. So is that even working? I have no idea. So let's see. So we have paint here. Change that to like 2 minus. Make this instead of 4. Let's make it like 12 times that. Make it more visible that, you know, something's going on. I'm gonna go ahead and and clear the screen here. Interesting. Yeah, you can see that. You can see that it's oscillating more if I press lighter. And I actually want to increase that effect, so I'm gonna increase this amplitude to like 28, which is a huge jump, but I keep doing that one instead. Okay, so interesting. Interesting. I don't know if you can hear it, but I'm sort of doing this to the beat of the music playing in the background. Cool, so let's go ahead and just draw with it a little bit and just run around. So one of the issues here is actually it starts painting as soon as I touch, and the pressure isn't quite high yet. So it has this initial tail element that's always going to be a thin brush instance. One way to deal with that actually is to have a timer whenever I press with mouse press, and keep ticking it down. I don't know. I mean, that might be a weird situation, but I don't know. Why not? So we're just gonna call it countdown. This isn't amazing design, but let's just roll with it. So let's do like 0.8 over here. Actually, let's max countdown equals, or let's just call it delay. So delay is like 0.8, and then we started at delay, and every tick we will just keep. So tick does get a parameter which is dt, so we can just count down. This is just gonna keep going on forever. I mean, whatever, right? So let's do that. And we only paint if countdown is greater than 0, then return. Okay. So let's see what happens. Yeah, that was a huge delay, but it does work. So let's change the delay over here to like, point something. So yeah, the keyboard has trouble sometimes, but oh yeah, okay, so 0.1. So yeah, that does seem to help a little bit. So can go here and clear, come back. Actually, that delay is pretty small, so I'm gonna go with a bit larger delay. Maybe 2. Oh, whoops, that's not how you set things. That's how you set things. So. This is cool. Alright, well, so that's what I have for this session.